Captain Jake Miller walked across the bridge of his ship, the USS Horizon. The stars outside looked the same as they had for the past 3 weeks. This was supposed to be a simple patrol mission through empty space. Nothing exciting ever happened out here in the far reaches of human territory. Jake liked it that way. Simple missions meant his crew stayed safe and everyone went home to their families. Lieutenant Lisa Brown sat at her communication station, checking the daily reports from Earth. She had been doing this job for 5 years and knew every sound the equipment made. That was why the new noise caught her attention right away. It was soft at first, like a whisper mixed with static. She turned up the volume and listened carefully. "Captain," Lisa called out, "I'm picking up something strange." Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of strange?" "It sounds like a distress signal, but it's not coming through on any of our normal channels. The pattern is weird too. Listen to this." She played the signal through the bridge speakers. The sound filled the air. It was definitely not random noise. There was a rhythm to it, like someone tapping out a message. But it was not in any human language or code that Jake had ever heard. Chief Engineer Pete Johnson came up from the lower decks where he had been checking the engine systems. His hands were dirty from working on the machinery, but his eyes were bright with curiosity. "What's that sound?" "We're not sure yet," Jake replied. "Lisa thinks it might be a distress signal." Pete listened for a moment. "It's definitely artificial. No natural phenomenon makes patterns like that. Someone or something is trying to communicate." Dr. Amy Clark, the ship's medical officer, had been reading in the corner of the bridge. She put down her tablet and joined the group around Lisa's station. "How far away is it coming from?" Lisa worked at her controls, trying to trace the signal's origin. "It's hard to tell exactly. The signal is very weak. I'd guess it's maybe 2 days away at maximum speed." Security Chief Tony Martinez had been monitoring the conversation from his station. "Captain, regulations say we need to report any unknown signals to command before investigating." Jake nodded. Tony was right about the regulations. But something about the signal bothered him. It was getting weaker every few minutes. If it really was a distress call, whoever was sending it might not have much time left. How long would it take to get a response from command? Jake asked. Tony checked his communication protocols. At least 6 hours for the message to reach them. Maybe another 6 for them to decide what to do. Then 6 more for their response to reach us. That's 18 hours minimum. Jake looked at the signal analysis on Lisa's screen. The pattern was definitely repeating, but each repetition was fainter than the last. "Lisa, at the current rate of signal decay, how long before we lose it completely?" Lisa ran some quick calculations. "Maybe 12 hours, sir. After that, we won't be able to track where it came from." The bridge fell quiet, except for the strange rhythmic sound coming from the speakers. Jake had been a starship captain for 10 years. He had followed regulations his entire career. But he had also learned to trust his instincts. Right now, his instincts were telling him that someone needed help. "Pete, how fast can we get there?" The engineer checked his instruments. "If we push the engines hard, we could make it in about 36 hours. "But Captain," Tony said, "we don't know what we might find. It could be dangerous." Dr. Clark spoke up. "It could also be someone who needs medical attention. If there are survivors, every hour could matter." Jake walked to the main view screen and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, someone might be dying. The smart thing would be to follow regulations and wait for orders from command. But the right thing might be something else entirely. "Lisa, can you clean up the signal any more? Maybe figure out what they're trying to say?" Lisa worked at her station for several minutes. The computer tried different ways to decode the pattern, but nothing worked. "I can't make sense of the language, sir. But the mathematical structure suggests intelligence. This isn't just random noise." "What about the source?" Can you tell us anything about what kind of ship it might be? The signal strength suggests something big, maybe larger than us. But the power output is decreasing fast. Whatever is sending this is losing power. Jake made his decision. Set course for the signal's origin. Maximum speed. The crew looked at him with surprise. Tony opened his mouth to object, but Jake held up his hand. I'll take full responsibility for this decision. If Command wants to court-martial me later, that's fine. But I won't ignore a distress call just because it comes from someone we don't recognize. Pete grinned and headed for the engine room. You got it, Captain. I'll get us every bit of speed this old ship can give. Lisa began plotting their course. Course laid in, sir. Engage. The stars on the view screen shifted as the horizon changed direction. Deep in the ship's engines, power flowed through the systems, pushing them faster than they had gone in months. As they traveled toward the unknown signal, Jake wondered what they would find. In all of humanity's years in space, they had never encountered another intelligent species. The scientists said it was possible, even likely, but it had never happened. The signal continued to play softly in the background, a lonely voice crying out in the darkness between stars. Jake hoped they would reach it in time. He hoped even more that they would be able to help whoever was sending it. The next 36 hours would change everything for humanity, though Jake could not know that yet. All he knew was that someone needed help, and he was going to try to give it to them. The alien ship appeared on their screens, like a ghost from a nightmare. It was massive, at least 3 times the size of the horizon, but clearly dying. The hull showed huge cracks and holes where metal had been torn apart. Emergency lights flickered weakly across its surface, like the last heartbeats of a wounded animal. Captain Jake Miller stood on the bridge, staring at humanity's first contact with alien technology. The ship was unlike anything human engineers had ever designed. Its shape was smooth and curved, almost like it had grown rather than been built. But despite its alien appearance, the damage was easy to understand. This ship was in serious trouble. Life. Signs? Jake asked. Dr. Amy Clark worked at her medical scanner, trying to make sense of the readings. The ship's hull is blocking most of my scans, but I'm detecting what might be life signs. Very faint, maybe 3 or 4 individuals. Their life readings are weak and getting weaker. What about the atmosphere inside? Toxic to humans. High levels of nitrogen and some gases I don't recognize. We'll need full environmental suits if anyone goes over there. Lieutenant Lisa Brown was monitoring the distress signal, which was now much stronger. Captain, the signal is definitely coming from that ship. It's still repeating the same pattern, but it's much weaker than when we first heard it. Chief Engineer Pete Johnson was studying the alien ship's design on his instruments. Their power systems are failing fast. Whatever keeps that ship running is almost dead. I'd guess they have maybe 6 hours before total system failure. Security Chief Tony Martinez checked his weapon systems out of habit, but kept them powered. Down. Captain, how do we even begin to communicate with them? We don't speak their language. Jake had been thinking about the same problem. We start simple. Mathematics, basic physics, anything universal. If they're intelligent enough to build a ship like that, they'll understand basic concepts. The bridge fell quiet as everyone stared at the dying alien vessel. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the universe. Their first contact with another intelligent species, and that species was dying. I'm going over there, Jake announced. Captain, that's not safe. Tony protested. We don't know anything about them. They could be dangerous. Look at their ship, Tony. They're not dangerous to anyone right now. They're dying. Dr. Clark stepped forward. If you're going, I'm going with you. If there are survivors, they'll need medical attention. I should go too, Pete added. Maybe I can help with their ship systems. Jake nodded. All right. Lisa, you stay here and monitor communications. Try to establish some kind of contact. Tony, keep the ship ready for a quick departure if necessary. The boarding party prepared in the shuttle bay. Jake, Dr. Clark, and Pete put on their environmental suits and checked their equipment. Dr. Clark brought a portable medical kit that could handle basic first aid for unknown biology. Pete carried tools that might work on alien technology. Lieutenant Kevin Adams joined them as security escort, though Jake hoped they would not need weapons. The 4 humans climbed into a small shuttle and launched toward the alien ship dock. As they got closer, the damage looked even worse. The alien ship's hull was scarred with what looked like meteor impacts and system failures. Whatever had happened to this vessel, it had been fighting for survival for a long time. There, Pete pointed to what looked like an airlock. That might be a docking port. The alien airlock was different from human designs, but the basic concept was the same. After several tense minutes, they managed to connect their shuttle to the alien ship. The airlock cycled through its process, and the door opened to reveal a corridor. It was clearly not built for humans. The ceiling was higher, and the walls curved in ways that seemed more artistic than functional. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows everywhere. Life signs are stronger in here, Dr. Clark reported, checking her scanner. Definitely 3 individuals, and they're all in the same location, about 200 meters that way. They moved carefully through the alien corridors. The ship's design was beautiful in its own way, but everything was failing. Lights flickered, and they could hear the sound of systems shutting down throughout the vessel. The corridor opened into a large room that might have been the ship's bridge. 3 figures lay on the floor, near what looked like control stations. They were unlike anything humans had imagined aliens would look like. The beings were tall and thin, with silvery skin that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. Their arms and legs were longer than human proportions, and their faces were narrow, with large eyes that looked almost like liquid silver. They wore clothes that seemed to be made from the same material as their ship. 2 of the aliens were unconscious, but the third opened his eyes as the humans approached. Those large silver eyes showed no fear, only curiosity, and what might have been hope. Dr. Clark immediately began scanning the conscious alien with her medical equipment. Their biology is completely different from ours, but the basic life functions are similar. They're all severely dehydrated and undernourished. This one is the strongest, but even he won't last much longer without help. The alien tried to sit up and made sounds that were clearly attempts at communication. The sounds were musical, almost like singing, but with patterns that suggested language. Jake knelt down beside the alien and tried to think of how to communicate. He pointed to himself and said slowly, "Jake, human." Then he pointed to the alien and made a questioning gesture. The alien seemed to understand. He pointed to himself and made a sound that was something like Zentar. Then he pointed to his 2 unconscious companions and made similar sounds. Pete was examining the alien ship's control systems. "Captain, their power core is almost dead. The life support systems are failing. Even if we could communicate perfectly, I don't think we can fix their ship." Dr. Clark looked up from her medical scans. "We need to get them to our ship. They need immediate medical attention, and our life support can be adjusted to help them." The alien called Zentar seemed to understand what they were discussing. He struggled to stand and walked slowly to one of the control panels. His long fingers moved over controls, and suddenly the room filled with images of star charts and what looked like technical diagrams. "He's trying to show us something," Jake realized. The star charts showed their current location and a course leading to a distant star system. Zentar pointed to the destination and then to his unconscious companions. He was trying to tell them where they had been going. Pete studied the technical diagrams. Some of the symbols were impossible to understand, but others showed basic engineering concepts. I think he's showing us how their ship works. Or worked anyway. Dr. Clark had finished her scans of the other two aliens. They're alive, but barely. We need to move them now. Zentar seemed to understand the urgency. He gathered some items from around the bridge, and then helped the humans carry his companions to the shuttle. It was clear that he was also very weak, but he was determined to help save his friends. The trip back to the horizon was tense. Dr. Clark worked to keep the three aliens stable, while Pete studied the alien technology they had brought with them. Jake contacted Lisa and told her to prepare the medical bay for 3 unknown patients. As their shuttle docked with the horizon, Jake looked back at the dying alien ship. Soon it would be just another piece of debris floating in space. But its passengers would live, at least for now. The hard part was just beginning. How do you save the lives of beings you know nothing about? How do you communicate with someone who doesn't share any of your references for life itself? Dr. Clark was already working on those problems as they carried the aliens to the medical bay. I'll need to completely redesign our life support systems, she muttered. Their atmospheric needs are totally different from ours. Jake watched as his crew worked to save 3 strangers from the stars. He did not know it yet, but this act of simple kindness would eventually change the course of human history. All he knew was that 3 beings were dying, and his people were going to do everything they could to save them. The message from Admiral Helen Rogers came through the next morning, while Dr. Amy Clark was still working to save the 3 aliens. Jake Miller read the orders on his private screen in his captain's quarters. The words were clear and direct. Return to Earth immediately with the alien subjects for study and quarantine. Jake sat back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. He had not slept in over 20 hours, and now this. He read the message again, hoping he had misunderstood something. But the orders were exactly what he had feared they would be. "Captain to the bridge," came Tony Martinez's voice over the communication system. "We have another transmission coming in." Jake made his way to the bridge, where the main screen showed Admiral Rogers herself. She was a stern woman in her 60s, who had commanded the Terran space fleet for the past 10 years. Her face showed no emotion as she spoke. "Captain Miller, I have reviewed your report about the alien contact. While I understand your humanitarian concerns, you have placed your crew and potentially our entire species at risk. These beings could carry diseases we know nothing about. They could be advanced scouts for an invasion force. We simply cannot take chances with the unknown." Jake tried to interrupt, but the Admiral continued. "You will immediately place the aliens in secure containment and return to Earth at maximum speed. Our scientists need to study them to determine if they pose any threat to humanity. This is not a request, Captain. This is a direct order from Fleet Command." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Jake looked around at his crew. Lisa Brown was monitoring the alien's ship, which was still drifting nearby and losing power by the hour. Pete Johnson was studying the alien technical data they had recovered. Tony Martinez was watching Jake carefully, waiting to see what his captain would do. "Sir," Tony said quietly, "orders are orders." Jake nodded, but did not respond immediately. Instead, he called Dr. Clark on the internal communication system. "Amy, I need a status report on our guests." Dr. Clark's voice came through tired but determined. "2 of them are stable now, but the third one, Zentar, is getting worse. I've managed to create an atmosphere mix that helps them breathe, but their biology is so different from ours. They need specific nutrients that I can't synthesize with our equipment." "How long do they have?" There was a pause. "Maybe 3 days, possibly less. And that's only if I can figure out their nutritional needs. Jake, these beings are not just aliens. They're refugees Zentar has been trying to communicate with me using basic mathematics and pictures. Their world is gone, destroyed by their dying star. They've been traveling for years looking for a new home. Jake felt the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on him. What would it take to save them? I need their ship's medical database, if it has one. Or we need to get them to wherever they were going. Zentar showed me star charts. There's a planet about 2 weeks away that they believe can support their kind of life. Pete Johnson's voice came over the communication system. Captain, I hate to make this worse, but their ship is dying faster than we thought. The power core will fail completely in about 6 hours. After that, we won't be able to recover any more information from it. Jake closed his eyes and tried to think clearly. Admiral Rogers expected him to return to Earth with the aliens as prisoners. But doing so would probably kill them. Dr. Clark had made it clear that they could not survive the long trip to Earth without proper medical support. Tony, what's the penalty for disobeying a direct order from Fleet Command? Tony looked uncomfortable. Court-martial, definitely. Probably the end of your career, maybe prison time. And not just for you. Anyone who goes along with it could face similar charges. And if we try to save them instead? That would mean ignoring direct orders and potentially putting the ship in danger by staying in unknown space. Jake walked to the main view screen and looked out at the dying alien ship. Somewhere in that failing vessel was information that could save 3 lives. But retrieving it meant disobeying direct orders from his superiors. Lisa, have you made any progress in communicating with them? Some, sir. Zentar is very intelligent. He's learned some basic English words, and I've picked up a few of their concepts. He keeps trying to tell me something about other ships, other species. I think there might be more aliens out there, friendly ones. What kind of other species? I'm not sure. He draws pictures of different kinds of beings. Some look peaceful, others look dangerous. It's like he's trying to warn us about something, or maybe offer to help us understand what's out there. Dr. Clark's voice came through the communication system again. Jake, I need to tell you something else. These aliens, they've been trying to help me understand their biology. They're not asking us to save them. They're trying to teach me how to do it. Even though they're dying, they're more concerned about not being a burden to us. Jake made his decision. Pete, how long would it take you to download their ship's database? If I work fast and the power holds out, maybe 4 hours. Do it, Lisa. Keep working on communication. I want to know everything they can tell us about what's out there. Tony stepped forward. Captain, I have to ask. Are you planning to disobey Admiral Rogers' orders? Jake turned to face his security chief. Tony, I'm planning to save 3 lives. If that means disobeying orders, then yes. Sir, I can't let you do that. My duty is to this ship and to Fleet Command. The bridge became very quiet. Jake realized that he might be facing a mutiny from his own security chief. But before anyone could say anything else, Dr. Clark arrived on the bridge. Captain, Zentar wants to speak with you. I think he knows what kind of position we're in. Jake followed Dr. Clark to the medical bay where the 3 aliens were being cared for. Zentar was awake and sitting up on one of the medical beds. His large silver eyes focused on Jake as he entered. Captain Jake, Zentar said in careful English, I understand your people are afraid of us. Jake was surprised at how much the aliens' language skills had improved. You're learning fast. We learn quickly when survival depends on it. Captain. Jake, we do not wish to cause trouble for you or your people. If your leaders command you to take us as prisoners, we will go peacefully. Dr. Clark translated some of what Zentar could not say in English. He says they would rather die free than live as captives. But he also says that if going to Earth, As prisoners would help humans understand that not all aliens are enemies, they're willing to make that sacrifice. Jake looked into those large silver eyes and saw something he recognized. It was the same look he had seen in the eyes of human refugees during the colony wars. These beings had lost everything and were still thinking about how to help others. Zentar, what happens if we help you reach your destination? The alien's face showed something that might have been hope. We reach others like us. Others who have learned to live in peace with many species. We could teach your people about the galaxy, about which stars are safe and which are dangerous. Pete Johnson's voice came over the communication system. Captain, I've got access to their database. You need to see this. Jake returned to the bridge, where Pete had connected the alien ship's computer to their main screen. The display showed star charts unlike anything humans had ever seen. Hundreds of star systems were marked with different symbols. What are all those symbols? Near as I can tell, they're markers for different kinds of civilizations. Friendly ones, hostile ones, dead ones. Captain, these people have been traveling the galaxy for generations. They know things about what's out there that could keep humanity safe for centuries. Jake stared at the star charts. Here was knowledge that could guide humanity's expansion into space, help them avoid dangerous encounters, and find friendly civilizations. But only if he chose to help the aliens instead of following orders. The choice was no longer just about saving 3 lives. It was about what kind of species humanity wanted to be when they finally met the stars. The alien ship's database revealed secrets that changed everything Jake Miller thought he knew about the universe. As Pete Johnson worked through the technical data, a story began to emerge that made the 3 dying aliens more than just refugees. They were the keepers of galactic history. Captain, you need to see this, Pete called from his engineering station. The main screen filled with images that took Jake's breath away. Cities floating in space around distant stars. Beings that looked like living crystals, building impossible structures. Ocean worlds where intelligent creatures swam through liquid methane seas. What am I looking at? The history of this part of the galaxy, sir. These aliens, the Zelari, they've been documenting civilizations for thousands of years. Every species they've met, every world they've visited, it's all here. Dr. Amy Clark joined them on the bridge, her medical coat stained with fluids from alien biology she was still learning to understand. Zentar told me more about their mission. They're not just refugees, Jake. They're librarians. When their world was dying, their people scattered across the galaxy to preserve knowledge about all the species they'd encountered. Lisa Brown looked up from her communication station, where she had been working with translation software. I've been talking with Zentar about other civilizations. Some of them sound wonderful. Others sound terrifying. But he says there's a network of peaceful species that help refugees like them. What kind of network? He calls it the Galactic Preservation Alliance. Species that have agreed to help each other survive and share knowledge. They have safe worlds where refugees can settle, medical knowledge that works across different biologies. Even defense agreements against hostile civilizations. Jake studied the star charts on the screen. The galaxy suddenly seemed much more crowded and dangerous than humans had imagined. But it also seemed full of potential allies if they approached it the right way. Pete, what's the status of their ship? Power core is almost dead, but I've managed to save most of their database. The problem is, we can't repair their ship with what we have. It's too different from our technology. Dr. Clark stepped forward. Jake, I've learned something important about Zelari biology. They're not just physically different from us. They're incredibly long-lived. Zentar is over 300 years old by our standards. The knowledge and experience these 3 beings carry is irreplaceable. How long do they have if we can't get them proper medical care? Maybe 2 days, possibly less. Their bodies are shutting down from malnutrition and the stress of their ship's life support failure. Tony Martinez had been quiet through most of this discussion, but now he spoke up. "Captain, Admiral Rogers is expecting a response to her orders." "What do I tell her?" Before Jake could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Lisa's communication station lit up with incoming signals. "Captain, we have multiple ships approaching. They're human vessels, moving fast." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "How many?" "5 ships, sir. It's Admiral Rogers' task force. They'll be here in about 6 hours." The bridge fell silent except for the sound of alarms. Jake realized that Admiral Rogers had not trusted him to follow orders. She was coming to take the aliens by force, if necessary. "Tony, send a message to the Admiral. Tell her we're complying with her orders and preparing the aliens for transport." Tony looked surprised. "Sir, just do it." As Tony sent the message, Jake called a meeting of his senior staff in the conference room. When they were all seated, he looked around at the faces of people he had served with for years. "I want you all to know what we're really dealing with. Here, these aliens aren't just 3 random beings we happen to rescue. They're carrying knowledge that could determine humanity's survival in the galaxy." He activated the room's display screen and showed them some of what Pete had discovered in the Zalari database. Star maps showing hostile civilizations that had destroyed other species. Planets that looked habitable but were actually death traps. Trade routes used by peaceful species. If we turn them over to Admiral Rogers, they'll die in Earth's laboratories. If they die, this knowledge dies with them. "Doctor." Clark leaned forward. "Jake, I've been working with their medical data. They have knowledge about diseases and treatments that could save millions of human lives. But more than that, they have information about how to communicate with and treat dozens of other species." Pete added, "Their engineering data shows technologies we won't develop for centuries, but they're willing to share it freely. They see knowledge as something that should be given, not sold." Lisa spoke quietly. "Zentar told me something else. He said that how we treat them will determine how other species see humanity when we finally meet them. If we're known as the species that helps refugees, we'll be welcomed. If we're known as the species that captures and studies aliens, we'll be seen as a threat." Jake looked around the table. "I'm going to ask something of all of you that could end your careers. I want to help the Zalari reach their destination instead of turning them over to Admiral Rogers." Tony shook his head. "Captain, that's mutiny. We could all face court-martial. Yes, we could. And I won't order any of you to follow me. This has to be a choice each of you makes." Dr. Clark was the first to speak. "I became a doctor to save lives. These beings are dying, and I can save them. That's more important than my career." Pete nodded. "I've seen their technology, Captain. If we can establish peaceful contact with their allies, it could advance human civilization by centuries. That's worth the risk." Lisa looked nervous but determined. "I've been talking with Zentar for hours. He's not an enemy or a threat. He's a teacher who wants to help us survive in a dangerous galaxy. I'm in." All eyes turned to Tony Martinez. The security chief had always been a by-the-book officer who followed regulations without question. Jake waited, knowing this decision would determine whether his plan could work. Tony was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. "I joined the fleet to protect humanity. If these aliens can teach us how to avoid wars with hostile species, then helping them is protecting humanity. But I want it on record that I think this is the stupidest thing we've ever done." Jake smiled for the first time in days. "Noted. Now, here's what we're going to do." The plan was risky and probably impossible. They would use the remaining power in the Zalari ship to download as much of its database as possible. Then they would modify the Horizon's life support systems to keep the 3 aliens alive during the 2-week journey to their destination. When Admiral Rogers arrived, she would find the alien ship completely dead and the horizon gone. "We'll be deserters," Tony pointed out. "We'll be explorers," Jake replied. "The first humans to make contact with a galactic civilization." Dr. Clark had already begun modifying the medical bay to better support Zelare biology. Pete was working around the clock to extract every bit of useful data from their failing ship. Lisa was learning as much as she could about galactic politics. And the species they might encounter. As they worked, Centaur grew stronger. The improvements to the life support systems were helping all 3 Zelari recover. But more importantly, Centaur began sharing more detailed information about what they would find at their destination. "It is a refugee world," he explained in his improving English. "Many species live there in peace. They will welcome humans if humans come as friends. What if we come as conquerors?" Centaur's large silver eyes showed something that might have been sadness. "Then they will defend themselves, and they have allies throughout the galaxy." Jake realized that his crew was not just rescuing 3 aliens. They were determining humanity's first impression on a galactic community that had existed for thousands of years. The next few hours would determine whether humans would be welcomed as friends or feared as enemies. Either way, there was no turning back now. The refugee world appeared on their screens like a jewel floating in space. It was unlike anything Jake Miller had ever seen. The planet glowed with soft blue and green lights that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Space stations orbited around it in graceful patterns, and ships of dozens of different designs moved between them in organized harmony. "My God," whispered Lisa Brown from her communication station. "There must be hundreds of different ship types out there." Centaur stood beside Jake on the bridge, his silver skin now glowing with health after 2 weeks of Dr. Amy Clark's careful medical attention. His 2 companions, who had been unconscious when they first rescued them, were now walking around the ship and helping wherever they could. "This is Haven," Centaur explained. "It was built by the Galactic Preservation Alliance as a safe place for refugees from dying worlds. Over 40 species now call it home." Pete Johnson was monitoring the alien ships that had begun approaching them. "Captain, we're being scanned by at least 12 different vessels. Their technology is way ahead of ours. Are they hostile?" Centaur made a sound that Jake had learned was Zelari laughter. "They are curious. It has been many years since a completely new species arrived at Haven." Lisa's communication board lit up with incoming signals. "Captain, I'm receiving messages in dozens of different languages. The computer is trying to translate, but it's having trouble with most of them." "Let me help," Centaur offered. He moved to Lisa's station and began working with the translation software. Within minutes, the jumbled alien voices became clear. "Unknown vessel, please identify yourself and state your intentions," came a voice that sounded like wind chimes mixed with whale song. "This is Captain Jake Miller of the human vessel USS Horizon. We are escorting 3 Zelari refugees to safety and seeking peaceful contact with the Galactic Preservation Alliance." There was a long pause. Then another voice, deeper and more mechanical, responded. "Captain Miller, you are the first humans to reach Haven. We have heard stories of your species from the Zelari you rescued. You are welcome here." As they approached Haven, Jake could see the incredible diversity of the civilization they were joining. Ships that looked like living creatures swam through space alongside geometric vessels made of crystal. Beings and environmental suits worked on space stations, their forms ranging from humanoid to completely alien. "Centaur," Jake said. "What happens now?" "Now you meet the Council of Species. They will want to hear your story and decide how to approach contact with the rest of humanity." Dr. Clark joined them on the bridge. "Over the past 2 weeks, She had not only saved the three Zalari, but had learned incredible things about alien biology and medicine. Jake, the medical knowledge I've gained from working with our guests could revolutionize human healthcare. We need to share this with Earth. That might be complicated, Tony Martinez said. We're deserters now, remember? Admiral Rogers probably has arrest warrants out for all of us. Pete looked up from his engineering station. Captain, the technology I've learned from the Zalari database could advance human space travel by centuries. But it only works if we can establish peaceful relationships with other species. The Horizon was guided to a docking bay inside one of Haven's massive space stations. As they docked, Jake could see beings of many different species working together on the station's operations. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien he could barely comprehend their forms. Captain Miller, came a new voice over the communication system. I am Ambassador Kethva of the Council of Species. We would be honored to meet with you and hear the story of how you came to aid the Zalari. The meeting took place in a conference room that had been designed to accommodate dozens of different life forms. Jake and his crew sat at a table surrounded by beings from across the galaxy. Some breathed the same air as humans, others appeared only as holographic projections from their environmental chambers. Ambassador Kethva was a tall, elegant being with blue-green skin and 4 arms. Her voice was gentle, but carried clear authority. Captain Miller, please tell us how you came to rescue our Zalari friends. Jake told the story simply. How they had heard a distress signal, how they had chosen to investigate against regulations, how they had found 3 dying beings and decided to help them. He explained about Admiral Rogers' orders and how his crew had chosen to risk their careers to save lives. When he finished, the conference room was quiet for a long moment. Then Zintar stood and spoke in his own language. Ambassador Kethvi, translated for the humans. Zentar says that your species broke your own laws to preserve life. He says this is not weakness, but the strength that civilizations need to survive among the stars. Another council member, a being that looked like living crystal, spoke in musical tones. We have encountered many species over the millennia. Some seek to conquer, others to trade, still others to hide. But few seek simply to help strangers. This speaks well of your people. Ambassador Kethva leaned forward. Captain Miller, we understand that you cannot speak for all of humanity, but we would like to extend an invitation to your species to join the Galactic Preservation Alliance. What would that mean? It would mean that humanity would have allies across the galaxy. We share knowledge, provide aid during disasters, and help defend each other from hostile forces. In return, we ask only that member species commit to helping refugees and preserving the knowledge of civilizations. Jake looked around at his crew. They had come here as deserters fleeing court-martial. Now they were being offered membership in a galactic civilization. There's one problem, Jake said. My government will probably arrest us when we return to Earth. We disobeyed direct orders to help the Zalari. Ambassador Kethva made a sound that might have been laughter. Captain Miller, you will not be returning to Earth alone. A delegation of Alliance species will accompany you to ensure your safety and to begin formal diplomatic contact with your government. The next few months passed like a dream. Jake and his crew became the first human ambassadors to the Galactic Preservation Alliance. They learned about technologies that could solve Earth's energy problems, medical techniques that could cure diseases, and defense systems that could protect human colonies. But more importantly, they learned about the values that held the Alliance together. The commitment to helping refugees, preserving knowledge, and choosing cooperation over conquest. When they finally returned to Earth, it was not as deserters, but as heroes. The Alliance delegation made it clear that humanity's first contact with galactic civilization had been through an act of compassion, and that this had earned them respect throughout the galaxy. Admiral Rogers faced with representatives from 40 different species, quietly dropped all charges against Jake and his crew. The court-martial became a promotion ceremony. Dr. Clark established the first Interspecies Medical Research Institute. Pete Johnson led the team that developed humanity's first faster-than-light engines using Alliance technology. Lisa Brown became Earth's first universal translator, helping establish communication protocols with dozens of species. But it was Jake's decision on that day, when they first heard the Zelari distress signal, that changed everything. Years later, when Earth faced its own crisis during the Great Solar Storm, dozens of Alliance species came to humanity's aid. The kindness shown to 3 dying refugees had created friendships that spanned the galaxy. The story of the USS Horizon became legend throughout human space. Every starship captain learned about the crew that chose compassion over regulations, the crew that proved humanity worthy of a place among the stars, not through conquest, but through kindness. Zentar, now fully recovered and living on Haven, often told the story to young beings from across the galaxy. The humans could have followed their orders, he would say. They could have turned us over to their scientists for study. Instead, they chose to save lives, even at great cost. Themselves. This is why the Alliance welcomed humanity as equals, rather than fearing them as conquerors. Jake Miller, now Admiral Miller and Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Preservation Alliance, kept a simple motto on his desk that had been carved from metal, taken from the original alien ship they had found dying in space. It read, "In the darkness between stars, we choose to be light." The USS Horizon was retired to a place of honor at the Alliance's headquarters on Haven, but its legacy lived on in every human ship that carried that same motto. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not through military might or technological superiority, but through the simple act of helping strangers in need. And in the vast network of civilizations that made up the Galactic Preservation Alliance, humans became known as the species that would break their own rules to save lives. It was a reputation that opened doors across the galaxy and created friendships that would last for generations. The distress signal that had started it all had been weak and fading when Lisa Brown first heard it, but the ripples it created spread throughout the galaxy, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of history itself.